morning. The United Nations Secretary-General says the world is heading for a catastrophe unless climate change is prioritised. New figures released by the UN show concentrations of the three main greenhouse gases rose to record levels in the atmosphere last year. World leaders will meet next month in Egypt for the next UN Climate Summit, COP27. At last year's summit in Glasgow, COP26, a new global agreement was reached, the Glasgow Climate Pact, for countries to revisit and strengthen their current emissions targets by the end of this year. The plan was to reduce the use of coal, phase it down rather than phase it out. Money for developing countries would be significantly increased to help them cope with the effects of climate change and make the switch to clean energy. Our climate editor, Justin Rolat, reports from New York, where he has been talking to the UN Secretary-General.
It has been a year of extreme weather, devastating floods in Pakistan, drought in Somalia with millions threatened by famine, and record-breaking heat in the UK and many other countries. It's why the UN chief says climate is the most important issue in his in-tray.
Climate change is the crisis of our lifetime, is the defining issue of today's world. So climate change remains a central priority in everything we do. If we are not able to reverse the present trend that is leading to a catastrophe in the world, we will be doomed.
And a welter of new reports released by UN bodies today reveals the world's woeful progress on climate.
At the Glasgow conference, countries agreed to raise their carbon cutting game every year. Well, we've just got the figures in for this year, and just 24 out of 193 countries strengthened their plans. Now, if you take together all the pledges the world has made, we still see emissions increasing by 10% by 2030. Now, the science is very clear on this. It says emissions need to almost halve by 2030 to avoid the worst effects of climate change. So we are moving in the wrong direction.
It's the same story when you take an atmospheric perspective. Another new report shows concentrations of the main greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane and nitrous oxide, all hit record levels last year, with the biggest increase in methane ever recorded. It underscores the urgency of action.
Do you think the governments of the world recognise that?
Not necessarily all of them at the present moment. You have inflation, you have the consequences of the war, you have high prices of energy and food, you have then social unrest linked to that. So there has been indeed a tendency to put climate change in the back burner, and that is why it is so important to strongly advocate to bring back climate change to the centre of the international debate.
There have been fears some countries, including the UK, have been rolling back on some of their climate commitments. Liz Truss advised King Charles not to go to the UN Climate Summit in Egypt, for example.
Should the King go to COP27? Do you want to see him there? And what about the new UK Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak? Do you want to see him there in Egypt?
I would like to see them both.
I'm sensing that you are slightly worried about the UK government's commitment on climate. If they need to be held to account by the people, it suggests that they're not perhaps...
There were some hints, but I hope that those hints do not correspond to the reality.
Some hints of a sort of loosening of the commitment.
Because things are changing also very quickly in the British political life, so let's be optimistic about the future.
This year, we've had a taste of the kind of extreme weather climate change can bring. The message from the UN today is clear. Unless we raise ambition in Egypt, the world will face far greater extremes.
Now, you might think Ukraine, global inflation or the breakdown in relations between America and China were the key geopolitical issues. But the UN chief says relations between the northern and southern hemispheres, between richer and poorer countries, are also at a dangerously low ebb. He said wealthy countries underestimate how angry the developing world is about the impacts of climate change and its failure to deliver cash to help out. He said the key word is trust. He told me unless we re-establish trust, it will not be possible to successfully tackle climate change.